Well, hello, everybody. It's Dan Skip Allen here once again, and this is the latest episode of the 52 must see movies and why they matter. Now, this week, once again, I have Mr. Mark Tordai with me. Hello, Mark.
Hey, Dan, how you doing?
I'm hanging in there. I just love talking about movies, so I'm glad to have you back. And this week, we're going to be talking about once again another Hitchcock classic, Rear
Yes.
Window.
Yeah. Great film.
Yeah, it really is. In this film, we basically have two main stars of the movie, and then kind of a couple subsidiary characters. Um, James Stewart, one of the greatest actors of all time. I don't care what anybody says. Plays a gentleman by the name of Jeffries,
Right.
and he has a girlfriend um, known as Lisa. Now, Lisa is played by Grace Kelly. Those are pretty much the main characters in the film. Um, the villain in the film is played by Raymond Burr. You know, everybody knows who Raymond Burr is if you're a fan of some of these TV shows that he was a lawyer. He was a lawyer in a wheelchair. God, what's the name of the? Do you know them show I'm talking to, Mark?
Oh, Perry Mason.
Perry Mason. That's it.
Yeah, I remember it was Perry Mason.
That's right. Perry Mason, a classic American TV show.
Yeah.
If you haven't heard of Perry Mason, shame on you. But before Perry Mason, he was the villain in Rear Window, and
Yeah.
the name of his character is I mean, what have we got here? Raymond Burr. Oh God,
I've
I
got it here as Lars Thorwald.
Thorwald.
Yeah.
My notes. I have my notes here, and Thorwald. Okay, Thorwald. He's mentioned as Thorwald quite a bit in the film by Jimmy Stewart, Jeffries, and Lisa Grace Kelly. So we also have kind of like a detective character that kind of helps Jeffries. They call him Jeff for short. Short, Jeffries is his last name. They call him Jeff for short. Then there's a maid, kind of like she's like a helper because he has a broken leg. He is a photographer that got in the middle of a race car race, and he got, I don't know if he fell down, got hit by a car, whatever.
Yeah.
Needless to say, he broke his leg. So
Mhm.
discuss some of these characters in the movie, and what your thoughts about those are.
Yeah, I think it's this movie. It's pretty much a lot of it is in the setup, which is really interesting because Hitchcock gives his hero, his the protagonist, obviously some kind of disability, right? He's got a broken leg and he's wheelchair bound, and I think that's kind of where everything in this really, really amazing and interestingly tense film starts. Obviously, as far as characters are concerned, yeah, for sure. I mean, Jimmy Stewart was one of the greatest American actors of all time, hands down. He, was in a ton of movies. It's a Wonderful Life, and so forth and so forth. So he was such an iconic actor. Again, I love the fact that his character is confined to a wheelchair. It's just so brilliant because if he's not, this entire movie doesn't make any sense. Because he could have obviously taken easy routes to do certain things, but I just love that. Grace Kelly, of course, we know she became the Princess of Monaco later in life, and she's in this, and they've got a really interesting chemistry together. They have a very interesting interaction. Such naturalistic actors that it just sort of worked. And of course, as we mentioned for North by Northwest, she's a blonde, so she's another Hitchcock blonde, and she's certainly one of my favorite ones. She's got a lot of like um, enthusiasm in this role, and she's just really, really, really great. So yeah, both of them are the main characters. Of course, after that, then yes, Raymond Burr, and Raymond Burr basically plays a small role throughout. Of course, more of a major role closer to the end of the film. And during that time when he appears toward the end, it gets really, really intense. And yeah, I think that's also one of the most iconic villain roles as well. He's fantastic.
All right, so I always ask the question, why is this film an essential film for people to watch? And now is that time. Mark, why is Rear Window essential for people to watch?
I think there's three reasons. There are many reasons why, but I'll try to narrow it down to three. First, as I mentioned before, the character with the injury, which we didn't see very often in classic films. It was very rare that you would have a character, if at all, confined to a wheelchair, confined to a bed through the entire runtime of a movie. So in that sense, that was like really new. Number two, it's Hitchcock, so it's the master of suspense, and it's that build towards something and build towards something and build towards something, while at the same time, he brilliantly was able to give a lot of doubt within, and you actually question yourself when you watch the film. It is 100, I think, why a set designer or an art director or something like that should watch this film, is because it probably has one of the most intricate and most amazing actual physical sets of all time, because it's basically set in a soundstage, quite a large one. I think they also had some exteriors as well, but it was mainly set indoors for the most part. But the entire courtyard of this of the setting, which is of course in an apartment, and the apartment buildings that are across from this courtyard, across from Jimmy Stewart's character, is actually really revolutionary for the time. And all the intricacies of all the characters and how he's kind of with his telescope sort of looking at them and stuff and binoculars and whatever is just brilliant. So I would say it's definitely seminal in those areas. So the areas of suspense and writing, and the areas of having a character being somewhat handicapped or disabled for temporarily, and then also specifically for the art direction, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I absolutely, I agree with almost everything that you're saying, and I want to get into, Alfred Hitchcock. He really does set these interesting environments for his films, and he gets you glued into the films for one reason or another. And in this, you're the Jimmy Stewart character, you're Jeffries, and you're looking out that window and you're seeing all of this. You're seeing the ballerina, you're seeing the piano player, you're seeing Mrs. Lonely Hearts, you're seeing the newlyweds, and you're seeing Lars Thorwald and his wife. And you're seeing the lady downstairs, and you're seeing the couple upstairs with the little dog and the little pulley. And you're seeing all of these people. And then you even get a view of the alley, which gives you a view of the street. So you have such a viewpoint, a bird's eye view, if you will, to so much going on. And you're glued to the screen, because you're like, all right, what is going to be the thing that's going to get this story going? And he's just kind of looking out. He's, he doesn't know. He's thinking, I'm just sitting here eating my sandwiches and blah, blah, blah. I want to get out of this house. There's claustrophobia of this house. And that's kind of what plays into what makes this movie so great, is the claustrophobia of being stuck in that apartment. And then your mind starts playing tricks on you, and you're like, okay, am I seeing what I think I'm seeing? And that's why Alfred Hitchcock is such a great director. He puts these thoughts in your head as long as also with the Jeffries character played by Jimmy Stewart. And kind of like the conscience of the film is Lisa, played by Grace Kelly, and she really is a conscience. And she's, I mean, wow, she is absolutely breathtaking every time she comes on scene. I mean, she's in new dresses, and you're like, wow, she's gorgeous. We're in 2017, Mark, and she is drop dead gorgeous for today's standards. I mean, drop dead gorgeous for today's standards. I mean, I was like, wow, man, she is hot. So let's get into some of the little clues of this film that lead us to where this is all going to go. Okay, like I said, we have the couple with the pulley system. They lower their little dog down, and he goes downstairs, and he kind of does his business down in the yard, down the little courtyard, down in the yard downstairs. So when you're watching, like, all right, this dog is scratching over there in the flowers. He's why is he scratching in the flowers?
Yeah, that I think is really cool. Just how the whole, that's called the inciting incident, right? So how from we are already sort of introduced to the characters and what's going on with Jimmy Stewart, and then of course the story has to start, and it has to be about Thorwald. And yeah, that's a really interesting piece there, because it's just Hitchcock. Like, Hitchcock just had that really creepy, simple but creepy way of introducing something that would eventually become very terrifying. And he did that in a lot of other movies. The Birds was one, for example. And I also would be remiss if I didn't mention that it has been satirized. And I grew up on the even before seeing Rear Window, The Simpsons actually satirized it. And they did a brilliant episode about that. And just as you mentioned, the whole what does the dog find? I think they have something similar. And again, this is just like, it sets up what's going to happen in this film. It sets up where it's going to go. It sets up what Jimmy Stewart, all the things that happens with his characters, and the paranoia and the sort of obsessions. And yeah, it's just incredibly brilliant.
Okay, so then we get this scene where Thorwald and his wife are arguing, and she's in the bedroom and he's in the other room, and you get to see multiple rooms in his house. You even get to see the hallway leading to his apartment, so you get a lot of viewpoints for the Thorwald character. The hallway, the dining room, the kitchen area, that area, and then the bedroom. And then all of a sudden you see the wife, she kind of waves like, get out of here, and Thorwald leaves. Now, he's a jewelry salesman, and he's a traveling salesman, so he has a suitcase with jewelry and stuff like that in it. And so we don't think much about the argument, except we start to notice that Thorwald's wife isn't there anymore. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's a subtlety, because he's, at this point, of course, he's stuck. He's not sure what to do all day, so he's kind of looking around. And yeah, it's one of those things where, again, it plays to your doubts and sort of your paranoias, because I remember when I first saw the film, you do sort of notice that she's gone, but you don't really, I don't know about you, but I didn't think the worst originally. And so just the way that they play on that from that scene forward is really, really fascinating, because it is kind of a detail that is subtle. I kind of don't remember if it was, if I don't think he says anything, if I'm not mistaken. You can remind me, Dan, but yeah, she's not there. And then from that point on, he sort of notices it, I think, a little later, that there's,
yeah.
So I remember it kind of being a very subtle and quite fascinating how, because that's obviously the point of the movie, that of what's going on with him and with his wife. So yeah, it just sort of becomes kind of interesting from that point on.
Well, then you start seeing Thorwald show up late at night. he's going and coming late at night. And then all of a sudden, we see a big trunk show up in the apartment, and movers show up to take the trunk away. Now, this really starts getting Jeff's suspicions to a high level here, because you think, well, that trunk is big enough to put a person in there. And that's when we get the character of Doyle, his friend from the war. He was a photographer and Doyle was an infantryman. And so they went to, my guess is World War II together. So we get this new character introduced into this thing called Doyle. And of course, he's the guy, these guys are like best friends. He's a detective in the New York Police Department. So now we're adding this Doyle character with this whole scenario of the trunk showing up and getting moved by movers. So where would your thoughts go as far as this whole scenario?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, of course, as you just mentioned, it is big enough to put a body in, but I remember seeing it for the first time and not really picking up on that particular thing. Like, I think I was so wrapped up in the whole story and the whole pieces of what was going on that it didn't really occur to me that he maybe had killed his wife. It was more like they were moving or something. And then later on, when there's a little bit more going on and Jimmy Stewart mentions it a few more times, that's when I kind of looked back, and also watching it for the second time and the third time, I've seen it multiple times, then I picked up on that was the point, because originally it sort of went over my head. I just thought, oh, he's just moving or something. But yeah, that's definitely the point when he is moving her body for whatever reason. And I what I love about it is, again, it's not very obvious. It sort of is a setup, because it could be that they're moving, and that's completely fine, and it could be that way. But obviously, we know that that's not the case. So for me, I think I went with this, the part of, well, maybe they're moving or something, because they kind of look innocent, I guess. Like they're both cast very perfectly, because none of them, like, she doesn't, not her, but he, Thorwald, doesn't really look like someone who could commit such a heinous crime and be so evil, which of course is not the case in the end. But yeah, that's what I remember thinking, at least the first time.
No, you're absolutely right. And so Doyle comes back. The wife took a train to wherever, Indiana or wherever it was that I can't remember exactly where it was, but she took a train. She got on the train. She got off the train. He did his detective work, and he kind of makes Jeff out to be kind of feel stupid in a lot of ways, like this whole claustrophobia thing of him being stuck in his apartment, looking out, seeing all this stuff, playing games with him in his brain, until we go back to the dog. We hear the neighbor upstairs scream. There's a party at the piano player's house, and there's a lot of noise, and we find that the dog has been killed. And that we say, well, why is the dog being killed? And as watching the film, and Jeff, who's sitting and said, well, of course the dog's been killed, because he's scratching at the flowers, Thorwald's flower bed, because there was something buried in there. And so it becomes an issue where, okay, you're going to go. We get to the point where somebody, it ends up being the maid lady, the lady that's kind of taking care of Jeff, and Lisa jumps the fence, goes down, jumps the fence, and starts digging up the flowers. We're going to talk about those two scenes, the dog getting killed and then the ladies going down and digging up the flowers.
Yeah, that's a pretty famous scene, because yeah, again, I'm whenever I think of this movie, I think of the Simpsons episode, so they kind of do something like that, which is really funny. But it is, again, it's going back to the whole suspicion thing, and I love how he convinces them to do it, because he can't. And again, if he had just been able, like, again, it's the brilliance of Hitchcock, because if he was not with a broken leg chair, again, the movie would be so different, because he would just get up and do these things, and it wouldn't be as great. It wouldn't have worked. So yeah, they go down, they see these things, and gosh, again, from what I recall, there was there not a mix up or something, or is it? I guess because I'm again, so I'm sort of blending together. So it's been a little while since I've seen the film, but I do know the beats. But yeah, certainly it's like, I guess they're sort of onto Thorwald, and it's like, if you had any doubts, which of course you do, and as I said, I mentioned earlier that I did have doubts back and forth the first time I watched it on whether or not they were it was Thorwald, or if it might have been someone else who had done some crime or something. But I do remember very specifically sort of like enjoying the fact that he was able to just get both of those ladies out of the apartment to do something for him, which is just, yeah, very brilliant.
Well, we start figuring out that Jeff can call this man. And so what he ends up doing is trying to set him up by telling him to go to this hotel. So he convinces Lisa to take over a letter, and he reads the letter, and he says, well, you have to go to this hotel. And I know you did it. He says, I know you did it. And he ends up, so they can go do the digging. But then he does it again, because he calls him and he says, I know you did it. You're the culprit. You killed your wife. And he convinces him to leave the apartment. This is the big one. He convinces him to leave the apartment to go to the hotel. So Lisa, because they had seen him with his wife's handbag. Now, if you traveled somewhere, and I'm not a woman, and you're not a woman, but if you traveled somewhere and you went anywhere for any length of time, you're going to take your purse, your handbag with you, with your stuff in it. You're not going to leave it behind. But he sees him going through her jewelry and going through her handbag. So why is that left behind in the room? So they decide, okay, how are we going to get him out of the apartment so they can go and look through the stuff? And what happens is they call him. She goes over there, leaves him a letter, a note. I know you did it, da 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 da. Convinces him to leave and go to this hotel. Then she goes around, Lisa goes into the apartment, looks around, goes through the jewelry, goes through the handbag, and she's trying to find a clue. And she gets caught. And he calls the police on her. Lisa gets the police called on her by Thorwald. But she found something. She found her wedding ring. Now, anybody in their right mind who's married to another person, you don't take your wedding ring off. You're not going to take your wedding ring off. If you're married and you're happily married, you're going to keep your wedding ring on your finger. You're not going to travel somewhere for any length of time and not take your wedding ring. So that's two clues: the handbag with the jewelry and the wedding ring. Go into what your thought process is there, Mark.
Yeah, I again, I was referencing the scene when Lisa goes into the Thorwald's apartment, between the other two with the maid as well. That scene previous, but yeah, I that is a very, very intense scene. I remember, again, it's one of those, like, he's at the door and he's kind of coming back and they're not expecting him to, and then she gets caught. And of course, at this point, you don't know if she's going to get killed. What is he going to do? and so yes, ends up calling the police. But I think that's the wedding ring thing is very brilliant because specifically back in that day, right? Back in the 50s and 60s, when Rear Window, I think it was early 60s. Let me just look it up. 62 or something was Rear Window. 54, excuse me, that was even earlier. So back in 1954, yes, a woman who was married would not leave her wedding ring anywhere. I mean, that it was just maybe now I could see, it not being as big of a deal in some places in the world, or in some places, especially in America and Canada. But back then, it was just like if you were married, you had that ring on your finger, and certainly that incident leads to, the conclusion. Eventually, can leads to the conclusion, which again is really, really great, really powerful.
Then we have to get back to Doyle, because Doyle comes into this again because he's going to go and get Lisa out of jail. So, but he's not around. So this leaves Jeff unprotected. And what happens next is Thorwald sees something that Lisa does. She kind of does something so Jeff can see it. When she leaves her hand up with the ring on her hand, and then she ends up getting taken off to jail. So she's got the evidence that can convict Thorwald. Problem is, she's in jail. She's not the one that saw all this stuff. Jeff is. So he's alone in his apartment with no protection, with a broken leg, and guess what? Thorwald finally catches on, and he comes over. And they do it to perfection, because you start hearing this boom, boom, boom coming up the steps. He's a big guy. Thorwald's a big guy. So they want you to feel this demonstrative guy coming up the step. And of course, that's when the claustrophobia hits Jeff the most, because then he realizes, oh my God, there's no way I can get out of this. I'm alone here. And I mean, back then, nobody locked their doors. So what happens? He comes right in there. He comes right in the door. And you didn't think, how's he going to get out of this? What's going to happen here? And he uses his flash on his camera, the flash on the camera, to surprise Thorwald and get him get his eyes disoriented, get him disoriented so he can try to get away. And he crawls to the window. He gets to the window, and Thorwald's trying to grab him and whatnot. And of course, we know what happens next. Doyle and the police show up, and he falls out the window. But they kind of save him. In a way, they save him. In a way, they're saying he broke his leg. His other leg. He broke his second leg. And because of the ring and everything that Lisa said, that was enough for them to have doubt.
A reasonable doubt.
Reasonable doubt that something fishy was going on with Thorwald and his wife. And of course, he gets some police officers, and he comes running over there. And once he's going after Jeff, then they got him by then. Just talk about the ending of the movie and all, in the light and all that stuff.
Yeah, gosh, I think Rear Window is honestly one of my favorite endings in film history. Specifically, I mean, in classic film history. It's not really a twist, because of course all the beats are once we get to the place where we know it's Thorwald. But yeah, I remember when Thorwald sort of starts to understand who it is, and then, as you mentioned, the time it takes Thorwald to get to the Jimmy Stewart's apartment is like really, really intense. And then, as you mentioned, the stairs. And Hitchcock was, of course, brilliant for the things you didn't see. So there's a lot of that. And also, as you mentioned, he comes running in. He gets the flash in his eyes and so forth. And yeah, it is really just honestly one of the most intense and surprising endings to a film, because at least for me, when I saw it for the first time, because I wasn't 100% sure it was Thorwald, all along because there were still doubts, which I thought again Hitchcock played into the film very well. That I was like really surprised that it was him, and then how violent he was, especially. So then it makes sense, right? Because he's very violent with Jimmy Stewart, right? So then you're thinking, oh crap, this person who looks very innocent and looks like kind of just a guy, has this darker side. And I think all of those reveals in that one scene, plus again all of those classic stuff like the camera flash and the stairs. Again, one of my absolute favorite endings of all time because it is something that just accentuates the film and it just takes it to another level of suspense. And it's Hitchcock. He was brilliant,
Yeah, I mean, watching it. I mean, I've watched it dozens of times since I was a child, and I think other people have tried this. We've seen the Christopher Lee version. We've seen, and I know you're gonna say blasphemy, but we've seen an aspect of something like this with Lady in the Water. This kind of type of situation, and I don't think anybody has been able to do it, even close. And I think this is something you can try. It's not something that's out there that's out of the possibility that you can't try something similar to this. You have I remember classic film, not a classic, but an older film, the four hotel rooms, that was a good one. You had kind of like a murder going on in the hotel. That was kind of interesting, but nobody's really done it even close to Hitchcock. I mean, it's really been something that's only been done once, really, in great, and that's why I think Rear Window is an absolute essential film-going experience for everybody, with everything that was involved, and the acting, the story, the suspense, and that's why we're talking about it today on this episode of the 52 Must-See Movies and Why They Matter. Well, Mark, thank you for being on this episode, and where can you be found?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram, ARKTORDAI, and I have a brand new YouTube channel with my friend and I, Gordon Powis. We're reviewing films and TV shows. We have about 5 videos up right now, and you can find that if you Google a 2 Maniacs review with the number 2, or go to YouTube and type in Acceleration Productions with the ACCEL. So either one of those two. You'll also find the links on my Twitter and Instagram if you follow me there. And yeah, I would love people to go on to my new channel and just to check out my content and leave comments and rate and all that stuff. So again, Dan, thank you so much, and thank you for having me on.
No problem, Mark. And obviously, you can find me at Dan Skipbound on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, and or at the From the Fourth Row. And I also do a podcast with my host Vincent Spada, and we just did one yesterday. It should be up probably tomorrow, called The Best Damn Movie Show. And then also I do another show on this channel called The Top 5 Weekly. My last episode was car chases in honor of the Fate of the Furious. And if you like this episode of the 52 Must-See Movies and Why They Matter, you can go on the Best Damn Movie Show channel, and we have 3 other episodes up right now. It Happened One Night. I'm trying to remember the episode. North by Northwest in Casablanca. So, good night.